right now, the fate of the global economy is dangling by two very different threads.
Yeah, two very distinct choke points.
Exactly. One is, a narrow 21-mile stretch of water in the Middle East, and the other is, strangely enough, a string of computer code sitting in a server farm somewhere in South Korea.
It's wild to think about.
It really is. Today, we are looking at what happens when the physical world and the digital world both hit a brick wall on the exact same day. So welcome to the deep dive. We are pulling from the June 18th, 2026 edition of the Daily Tech Reader, and our mission today is to really connect these massive dots for you.
And it is a staggeringly massive news day. I mean, we're looking at a moment where the map of the world is being fundamentally redrawn in real time.
Yeah, physically and digitally. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We're
Yeah.
talking about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, this crazy 8-day AI blackout crippling global tech giants, and the very heavy, very physical infrastructure powering all of this down in the American South.
Not to mention some historic drone strikes and the biggest sports celebration New York City has seen in over 2 decades.
Right. So let's jump right in. The massive geopolitical headline today. Commercial vessels are actually moving through the Strait of Hormuz again.
Which is a profound shift.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. Central Command confirmed the naval blockade of Iranian ports is officially over.
Yeah, and this follows that U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding that was just signed at Versailles. And President Trump held a pretty long, hour-long press conference on Thursday to defend the agreement. Now, really quickly, before we explore the specifics of that, I just want to explicitly remind you, the listener, that we are not taking a political side here.
Right, absolutely not.
We're merely conveying the diplomatic realities and the market reactions exactly as they are detailed in our sources today.
And those diplomatic realities are, frankly, highly contentious.
Yeah, they are.
In that press conference, Trump aggressively pushed back against critics who argues that this new deal achieves a lot less than the 2015 Obama-era agreement.
He downplayed the concerns about Iran's enriched uranium, right?
He did. He stated he believed those stockpiles were currently just buried under rubble. And he drew a very hard line, threatening to resume bombing if Tehran defects from the terms.
But he also acknowledged a pretty big concession. Iran attains the right to reimpose its own blockade on the strait if they feel the terms aren't being met.
Exactly. But, the markets, they largely ignored the political debate.
Oh, completely.
They just saw the physical flow of oil returning, and the reaction was just absolute euphoria.
Oh.
We saw a total reversal of that Fed-driven shock from Wednesday. The Russell 2000 jumped 2.12%.
And the semiconductor stocks were the real story there. I mean, Marvell Technology shot up 12.12%. SanDisk was up 11.1%. Intel up 10.5%.
Huge numbers.
And as you'd expect when a massive supply choke point opens up, oil dropped. Goldman Sachs immediately cut its Brent crude forecast. They're projecting $80 a barrel for the fourth quarter of 2026 and $75 for 2027.
Which paints a very optimistic picture on paper.
Right, on paper. But I have to push back on that optimism a bit. It feels like we're looking at like a multi-car pileup on the highway. Everyone celebrates when the tow trucks finally clear the crashed cars away.
Sure.
But the traffic jam already stretches backward for miles, And every single truck in that line has to slowly accelerate gear by gear. Like, are we really out of the woods just because the blockade is technically over?
We are absolutely not out of the woods. Your highway pileup analogy is spot on. You look at the mechanics of global shipping, you can't just flip a switch and reset the supply chain.
Right.
Shipping analysts are screaming from the rooftops right now that a full recovery will take months.
Well, why does it take months? I mean, if the boats are cleared to move, why aren't they just moving through?
Because the entire nervous system of global logistics had already rewired itself around the blockage. The 4 largest container carriers in the world, Maersk, MSC, CMA, CGM, and Hapag-Lloyd, they didn't just, drop anchor and wait.
Oh, right. They restructured their routes.
Exactly. They restructured their massive 2026 routes to bypass the Middle East entirely, sending ships all the way around the Cape of Good Hope at the bottom of Africa.
So they are physically in the completely wrong part of the ocean right now.
Yes. You're talking about massive vessels carrying tens of thousands of containers booked on quarterly cycles. You don't just radio a ship off the coast of South Africa and tell it to do a U-turn.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unwinding those logistical contracts probably takes seasons.
And furthermore, look at the financial mechanisms. The war risk insurance premiums for transiting the Strait of Hormuz are currently sitting at roughly 8 times their pre-crisis levels.
8 times? Wow.
Yeah. An insurance underwriter doesn't just erase that kind of risk overnight because a memorandum was signed.
Wow, okay. So the physical oil and the cargo are slowly, painstakingly starting to resume their flow. But while the physical goods are moving, the flow of vital intelligence has completely hit a wall.
Yeah, we're flying blind at an incredibly dangerous moment. This is perhaps the most alarming detail in the sources today.
So Congress is currently on recess. And because of that, the renewal for FISA Session 702 has totally stalled. There's no scheduled vote. Now, before we talk about why intelligence officials are panicking, remind me what FISA Section 702 actually is on a functional level. Because to the average person, it just sounds like bureaucratic tax code.
It is far from administrative red tape. FISA Section 702 is the legal mechanism that allows U.S. intelligence agencies to intercept the communications of non-U.S. citizens located abroad without a warrant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It is basically the primary vacuum cleaner for overseas intelligence. To understand why officials are sounding the alarm, you have to look at the sheer volume. This specific program previously accounted for over 60% of the president's daily intelligence briefing.
Wait, 60% of the commander-in-chief's daily awareness is just gone.
Just gone.
And the timing couldn't be worse. The formal 60-day U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiation window is now open. The U.S. is walking into one of the most delicate geopolitical negotiations of the decade, entirely handicapped in its collection capabilities.
Exactly. And Iran is not the only flashpoint. If we look at the active global conflicts happening right now during this blind spot, the stakes become very, very clear.
Right, like the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yes, Ukraine just launched its largest single-night drone offensive of the entire war.
555 drones fired in a single night. That is staggering.
It really is. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin claimed roughly 190 of those were intercepted over Moscow, but several got through.
And they struck the Gazprom Neft Moscow oil refinery.
Which is a devastating infrastructural blow. I mean, that single refinery supplies more than a third of the Russian capital's fuel.
And this is the second time they've hit it in a week. It sent massive plumes of black smoke over the city, and it completely halted flights at 4 major airports. President Zelensky followed this up with a very stark warning, stating Moscow will burn if Putin continues the war.
So Eastern Europe is highly volatile right now. And if you pivot back to the Middle East, outside of the Iran deal, Israeli officials are currently in active, very tense negotiations with the U.S. over military deployments in southern Lebanon's security buffer zones.
Right, because Israel is maintaining its right to act independently against Iranian-linked targets in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza.
Which heavily complicates the broader U.S.-Iran peace framework. I mean, if Israel strikes an Iranian proxy, does that blow up the deal signed at Versailles?
Right, it's a house of cards.
And this diplomatic tightrope is further complicated by President Trump's very public rebuke of Prime Minister Netanyahu at the G7 summit on Wednesday.
Just think about the scenario here for a second. Imagine you were trying to negotiate a high-stakes, multi-party, multi-billion-dollar corporate merger. But the night before you sit down at the negotiating table, 60% of your background research team suddenly goes on strike.
They would be terrified.
You have no idea what the other sides are whispering about in the hallway. That is the reality for U.S. diplomats today.
It is a profound vulnerability, and it really illustrates how deeply interconnected information flow is with physical security.
Which brings us to a massive shift in how we think about borders. You know, historically, we think of geopolitical borders as dictating where military tanks can go or where cargo ships can sail.
Like the Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly. But those physical borders are now fundamentally redrawing the digital landscape. We are currently entering day 8 of the massive Anthropic AI blackout.
Yeah, the Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models remain completely offline for major global partners.
Now, Anthropic did just open a new office in Seoul, and their international chief vowed the models would return within days. But the irony here is that South Korea is the actual origin of this entire crisis.
That's the catalyst, yeah. The jailbreak that triggered the aggressive U.S. Commerce Department directive originally came through a South Korean partner called Project Glasswing.
Now, before we get to the fallout of that, what exactly are we missing here? What are Fable 5 and Mythos 5?
These are not your everyday simple chatbots. These are Anthropic's most advanced, parameter-heavy neural networks. We are talking about a cutting-edge compute that massive corporations rely on for everything from complex coding to data analysis.
Okay, so this isn't just people losing access to a fun text generator.
No, not at all. And the fallout from that Glasswing jailbreak has been severe. All Korean institutional access to these models has been revoked. Tech giants like Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, and even the Korea Internet and Security Agency have been completely locked out.
So the U.S. government effectively pulled the plug on an allied nation's access to American artificial intelligence. How does this even get resolved?
Well, out of the G7 summit in Evian, which, by the way, featured the CEOs of OpenAI, Anthropic, Mistral AI, Meta, and Google, DeepMind Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is floating a solution.
Right, Lutnick is circulating what he calls a trusted partners framework.
Yes.
So a trusted partners framework. That sounds to me like we are treating artificial intelligence the way we treat advanced weapons exports. Are we basically setting up like a digital NATO?
That is precisely what is happening. The framework creates a sanctioned, highly vetted channel. It would allow organizations in close U.S. allied countries to regain access to controlled American AI models, without the Commerce Department having to lift the overarching export control directive.
It's essentially digital passport control for computation. You don't just need an enterprise license and a password to log in anymore. You need a geopolitical security clearance from the federal government.
And this really signifies the absolute death of the borderless internet.
Right.
For decades, the tech industry operated on the assumption that code could just flow freely across the globe. But advanced AI models are now viewed by governments as strategic national assets, literally on par with nuclear technology.
But, treating computer code like a physical asset like nuclear material feels almost counterintuitive until you look at the staggering physical resources required to actually build and run these models. AI isn't just invisible magic in the ether.
Not at all. The cloud is heavily tethered to the ground.
Which brings us to an incredibly intense legal battle happening right now in Memphis, Tennessee. The NAACP is suing Elon Musk's xAI over their Colossus supercomputer facility.
And to give you a sense of scale here, Colossus houses an astonishing 200,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs.
And for those unfamiliar, those NVIDIA H100 chips are the highly coveted, incredibly expensive brain cells of the AI industry. They are central to training Musk's Grok model, and this facility also handles massive compute deals for Anthropic and Google.
It's a massive operation.
But here's the core of the lawsuit. The NAACP alleges that the facility's gas turbine and diesel backup systems are severely polluting predominantly black neighborhoods in Memphis, completely violating Clean Air Act standards.
Which begs the question, why does a cutting-edge tech company need diesel generators and gas turbines? Don't they just plug the servers into the wall?
Right. Well, it all comes down to the mechanism of power draw. A supercomputer running 200,000 H100 GPUs requires hundreds of megawatts of electricity. If xAI simply tapped into the Memphis municipal power grid, they would literally brown out the entire city. The grid just can't handle it.
Wow.
So tech companies are forced to build what are essentially their own mini fossil fuel power plants on site just to turn the computers on.
And the legal fight over this has escalated all the way to the federal level.
It has. The Department of Justice filed a brief on Thursday, officially siding with xAI. This effectively pits the federal government directly against environmental and civil rights groups. And again, just to maintain total impartiality here, we are simply exploring the structural tension presented in these sources. We are not endorsing either side's legal arguments in this lawsuit.
Right. But that tension highlights the massive hidden paradox of our digital acceleration. We build these AI models to, optimize green energy and solve climate change, yet they require massive localized industrial machinery to even function.
It's a huge contention.
A senior UN scientist issued a stark warning about this exact dynamic on Thursday. They pointed out the AI boom requires unbelievable water consumption just for data center cooling, massive carbon emissions from power generation, and huge physical land footprints.
The UN scientist actually called this a new form of imperialism imposed on local communities.
It's a profound observation. The benefits of AI, the fast processing, the medical breakthroughs are global and virtual. But the costs, the noise, the emissions, the water usage are hyper-local and deeply physical.
So every single time you use a cloud-based AI tool from your laptop, you are mechanically triggering heavy industrial machinery somewhere in a place like Memphis.
The digital ether is directly connected to the smokestack.
So we've been talking about massive structural global disruptions today, choke points in the Middle East, data center infrastructure, digital passports. But the physical world is also asserting itself right outside our front doors this weekend, and people are finding ways to navigate it locally.
Yeah, starting with some really intense weather extremes across the United States.
Tropical Storm Arthur has finally dissipated, but the physical reality on the ground is that devastating flash flood warnings are still lingering across the Gulf Coast and the Southeast.
We're talking about parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the Florida Panhandle.
Some areas have been pounded with more than 10 inches of rain since Wednesday.
And emergency officials in cities like New Orleans and Mobile are still begging residents to stay off flooded roadways.
Meanwhile, a completely different extreme is punishing Texas and the South. A dangerous heat dome is baking the region, with heat indices hitting 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
And a heat dome effectively traps high-pressure air over a region, pushing temperatures up and preventing cooler weather systems from moving in. It is definitely a weekend to stay indoors, stay hydrated, and check on your vulnerable neighbors.
Absolutely. But what is really fascinating is how, despite these geopolitical blind spots and these crazy weather extremes, there is incredible communal joy happening locally in the sports world. After a week of being completely boxed in by global tensions, people are finding release together.
They really are.
New York City is currently throwing its first Knicks NBA championship parade in 53 years.
Not since 1973. That is generations of fans who have never seen this happen.
The ticker tape is literally falling down the Canyon of Heroes in Lower Manhattan right now.
Yeah.
Jalen Brunson is the undisputed king of the city today after dropping 45 points in that series-clinching Game 5 against the Spurs.
The economic and cultural impact of a city coming together like this is just staggering. City officials estimate it's the biggest New York sports crowd since the 2000 Yankees World Series parade.
And the local TV ratings for a Thursday morning broadcast are approaching Super Bowl levels.
That kind of localized communal joy is so necessary right now. And we are seeing that emotional resonance on the international stage as well, specifically with the 2026 World Cup.
Day 8 of the World Cup delivered a truly historic milestone. Canada recorded its first ever World Cup win. And they did it in dominant fashion, routing Qatar 6-0 in Vancouver.
A Jonathan David hat-trick led the charge. Though the victory was a little bittersweet, as Canadian midfielder Ismail Kone suffered a serious injury after a reckless challenge.
Yeah, that was tough to see. But the cultural significance of that win for Canada cannot be overstated.
Definitely. And elsewhere in the tournament, Mexico clinched a knockout spot by beating South Korea 1-0. Switzerland beat Bosnia 4-1, and Czechia drew with South Africa 1-1.
Up next, the USMNT plays Australia in Seattle.
That should be a great match.
But we also have to mention the grueling human endurance happening at the U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills.
Oh, Shinnecock is infamous for its punishing conditions, and it is definitely living up to its reputation this year.
The golfers are battling brutal 35 to 40 mile-per-hour winds, which completely throws off the physical mechanics of their game. Plus, they dealt with a 2-hour fog delay on Thursday morning.
It's just a mess.
Rory McIlroy managed to navigate the chaos brilliantly, opening with a 69 to share the early lead. Meanwhile, world number 1 Scottie Scheffler, who is chasing the career Grand Slam, really struggled in the win and shot a 2-over.
And Jason Day actually had to withdraw mid-round with a back injury.
It is a total gauntlet of physical endurance.
It really is.
And, all of this news, the international markets, the massive infrastructure debates, the sports history is heading into a long weekend. We want to remind you that Friday, June 19th is Juneteenth National Independence Day.
Which means U.S. stock markets, the Federal Reserve, commercial banks, and post offices are entirely closed.
It's a mandatory moment of pause. The next U.S. trading session won't open until Monday morning, giving the logistical and financial systems a second to finally catch their breath.
And what a week to need a breath. If we synthesize the journey we've just taken through these sources, we started with the massive physical logistical tangles in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
We looked at the diplomatic blind spots caused by the lapse in intelligence gathering. We examined the geopolitical boxing in of artificial intelligence and its very heavy, localized environmental footprint in places like Memphis.
Right down to the extreme weather and the historic sports moments bringing local communities together. It really is a map being fundamentally redrawn before our eyes.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final question to ponder over the long weekend. As artificial intelligence becomes inextricably linked with massive physical resources and strict geopolitical borders, will the next major global conflict zone be a physical choke point like the Strait of Hormuz, or a digital pathway dictating who gets access to the most powerful computation on Earth?
Or perhaps, as we've seen today, they are fast becoming the exact same thing.
Something to really think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.